Hey guys, it's Miss Hofeld. I am going to read to you today from my kitchen because I've been doing a lot of sitting lately. Sitting at my computer and doing work and just kind of sitting and watching some TV. So today I needed to stand up. There's this awesome ledge there's a window right behind my iPad, so it gives me some nice light too. So I thought this would be a nice change and I would do a little reading from my kitchen today. We are going to read, my hope is 3 chapters today, because that will get us to the end of this first section that's called Monday. The next section's Tuesday, so each section of the book is going to be a different day in the life of Charlotte and Ben. So my hope is I'm going to keep track of time. I'm hoping to be able to read all 3 chapters. The last one's pretty short, but if I run out of time, I will just do 2 and then make sure I do the third one as a follow-up video. But we're going to start with chapter 5. It's called Plain and Simple. Rabbit hole. Research shows that our brains react differently when we hear the sound of our own name versus other words. There are about 5,163 different first names in common use in the United States. One of them is Charlotte. About 275,000 people in America are named Charlotte. Some people were born to have nicknames: Nico, Mimi, Shonda, and then there were Elizabeths and Madisons who were never Lizzies or Maddies. That's how the world worked, even if Charlotte didn't understand it. In elementary school, there was a girl in her class named Nicole Rodriguez. People started calling her Nikki just because. Do you have a pencil I can borrow, Nikki? Hey, Nikki, can I copy your paper? It happened organically. That's how nicknames were supposed to work. They crept into conversation, and next thing you know, boom, you had a second name, and only certain people knew what it was. Nicknames were personal. If you had friends who knew your nickname, it meant you had friends who really knew you. But one day, Nikki stood up in the middle of the classroom and yelled, "My name is Nicole! Nicole!" Everyone stared at her with their mouths hanging open. Charlotte couldn't believe it. Who gave up a perfectly good nickname? Charlotte would have loved to have one, something only her friends called her. Not that she had a lot of friends. She just had Bridget. Hearing your own name is one of the most powerful sounds in the world, Charlotte's father had once told her. So you want to make sure people say it the way you prefer. But Charlotte didn't prefer Charlotte. She preferred something more familiar, like Charlie or Lottie. She wanted someone to lean over and say, "Do you have a pencil I can borrow, Lottie?" Or, "Hey, Charlie, can I copy your paper?" But it never happened. She was Charlotte, plain and simple. Except when she played Scrabble. Then she was Lottie Locke. Some people called her best friend Bridge, but Bridget didn't care either way because she hated her name altogether. She said that Bridget Macaulay wasn't sophisticated. They'd tried switching names in the 3rd grade, but in less than 24 hours, they'd both realized that you can run away from your name as much as you want, but it always catches up to you. Even Bridget's father had a nickname. People called him Mac, including Bridget. She said it was more grown-up to call your parents by their first names. She never did it in front of them, though. "Mac and my mom are driving me bananas," she said now. Charlotte's mother had taken her home and driven back to the hospital, so Bridget had come over. They walked into the Lockhards' backyard on Hampshire Street. Charlotte was glad to have been dropped off, away from the white walls and medicinal smells of Crozer. She was glad, too, that her mother hadn't made her feel like the worst daughter in the world for not going into the room. "Maybe tomorrow," her mother had said. Bridget yawned as they made their way across the yard toward the short stone wall near the pear tree. The wall served as a fence that separated the Lockhards' property from their neighbors, the Rivieras. Their backyards were side by side. It only took a quick hop to perch yourself on top of the wall, which is exactly what Charlotte and Bridget did. They faced each other, like always, one leg dangled down. They were two opposites together, compare and contrast. Bridget had thick auburn hair and perfectly placed freckles that made her look older instead of younger. Charlotte was so spindly that she seemed tall, even though she wasn't. Bridget had curves. Charlotte was all straight lines. Charlotte was wearing last year's sneakers. Bridget bought a new wardrobe at the start of the school year. Charlotte had been surprised at all of Bridget's new clothes, and Bridget had been surprised at Charlotte's old ones. They were surprising each other a lot lately. Bridget stretched one of her long, delicate arms toward an overhanging branch and snapped a pear from the tree. "You're going to get me in trouble," said Charlotte. Her mother didn't like when she picked the pears before it was time. "It's just a pear," Bridget rolled her eyes. "Your mom is so old-fashioned." That was Bridget's way of saying that Charlotte's mother was old. And she was right. Charlotte's parents were almost the same age as Bridget's grandparents. But that didn't negate the fact that Charlotte would be scolded for Bridget's stolen fruit. It didn't seem to faze Bridget, though. She tossed the pear in the air and caught it. "I can't believe your dad had a heart attack," she said. "How come they wouldn't let you see him?" Charlotte looked down at the stone wall beneath them and cleared her throat. "I was too afraid to go in. I didn't know what to say. Does that make me a terrible person?" "You have to be 13, apparently," said Charlotte. "I can't see him until he's out of ICU." "When will that be?" "The doctor said he might be moved tomorrow or 4 days from now. There's no way to know." A yellow leaf fell into Charlotte's lap. "See how the stem comes from this triangular point? Beautiful, isn't it? And the color, just like a painting." But the color wasn't from a painting. It was from a breakdown in chlorophyll. Charlotte knew. Rabbit hole. "I can't believe your dad had a heart attack," Bridget said again. "Can we talk about something else?" "Sure." Bridget tossed the pear. Up, down, up, down. "Tell me about the field trip. How big were Van Gogh's sunflowers?" "They aren't that big, really." "I bet the tag kids didn't even care about them." On Friday of last week, before the heart attack, when life was somewhat normal, Charlotte had gone on a field trip to the Philadelphia Museum of Art with the Talented and Gifted program, aka TAG. Bridget had been furious. "It's not fair that the TAG students get to do everything and the rest of us dummies have to stay behind," Bridget had said. "Besides, art is my thing, not your thing." That was true. Charlotte would have preferred to go to the Mutter, the medical museum that had bodies and heads and stuff. "I'll get my dad to take us," Charlotte had offered, but Bridget had sighed and stomped off. She apologized later, but her frustration lingered between them. "Did you know Van Gogh called the sunflowers a symphony of yellow and blue?" said Bridget now. "No, I didn't know that." Bridget turned the pear around and around in her hand. "Do you want to play Scrabble?" Charlotte asked. "No, you'll win. What's the point?" Bridget smiled toward the Riviera's yard and brightened. "Go get your dad's binoculars. Let's spy on Mateo. Mateo Riviera, the most gorgeous high school sophomore who ever lived. Mateo's younger sister Magda was in 7th grade with Bridget and Charlotte at West Middle School, but had inherited none of Mateo's mystery. Well, she had mystery, just not the same kind. Locks of dark hair fell over Mateo's eyes, and he always looked like he had a brooding secret that he was dying to tell, if only he could find the right person to confide in. Magda's hair was a perpetual mess. She was one of the top students at West Middle, but she counted to 10 with her fingers before every test and tapped on the teacher's desk when she turned in assignments. The kids called her Mad Magda. "I don't know where he put them," said Charlotte. This was a small lie. She knew the binoculars were in the drawer under the coffee pot, but it felt wrong to use them while her dad was in the hospital. "Too bad," said Bridget. She gazed at the Rivera's back door. "Maybe Mateo will come out and you can ask him to play Scrabble." "Maybe I will," Charlotte smiled. "And maybe I'll ask him to marry me while I'm at it." "Ooh, little Rivera and Lockhart babies, just think how smart those kids will be." No one else would ever win anything again. You never know. Mateo might not be good at word games. I'm sure he is. Look at Mad Magda. Things like that run in the family. She paused and squinted over Charlotte's shoulder. Oh God, speak of the devil. Magda had just come outside and was walking toward them. She was wearing last year's West Middle School t-shirt, faded and wrinkled, oversized shorts that probably belonged to Mateo, and socks of different lengths. Hey, Magda said. She pointed at the pair. The pears are not veals. They resemble nothing else. Bridget looked at her with both eyebrows raised. It's from a poem, Magda said. Oh, said Bridget. Magda turned to Charlotte. I'm sorry about your dad. Is he okay? Yeah, Charlotte said. She knew the poem, Study of Two Pairs by Wallace Stevens. She'd written it on a card for her mom's 55th birthday a few years ago. Her father had given her mother a painting of pears for the dining room in honor of her beloved pear tree in the backyard, and Charlotte had copied the poem in a card to go with it. Wind rustled, and a shower of leaves fell on them. Bridget immediately brushed them off. Magda raised her arms like she was receiving a gift directly from Mother Nature. Charlotte just sat there. When the breeze passed, Magda picked up one of the fallen leaves and held it gingerly by the stem. I can take a picture of this leaf, and an app on my phone will tell me what kind of tree it comes from, said Magda. Fascinating, Bridget said. Magda turned to Charlotte and spun the stem in her fingers. Are you excited about the next tag trip? I hope it's to the Mutter Museum. Said Charlotte. Yeah. Magda kicked the stone wall with the toe of her sneaker. Okay, well, see you at school, I guess. Tell your dad I hope he feels better. After she walked across her yard and disappeared back into her house, Bridget shook her head and said, It's hard to believe a living god like Mateo Rivera is related to Mad Magda. Eggheads are so weird. No offense. Mad Magda. Maybe some nicknames weren't so great. We're moving on now to Chapter 6, and this one is Life According to Ben, Part 3. Ben's mother finally knocked on the door at 8:30. He was surprised she held out so long. Usually, she buzzed over him like a fly. His father had probably told her to give him space, give him time to think, don't smother him so much. He had said those kinds of things sometimes. Maybe that's one of the things they argued about. Maybe that was one of the reasons. Ben considered this with each thoughtful knock. He was still splayed across his bed and staring at the ceiling. He hadn't moved. He needed to pee, but didn't want to leave his bedroom. Things still made sense in here. His comforter, his laptop, his Minecraft universe, the stuffed bookshelves. No one in this room was getting a divorce. Everything was in stasis. Ben, said his mother, her voice muffled. Are you okay in there? Yes. We're worried about you. Stasis. A state of equilibrium or stoppage. A state of unchanging. What are you doing? His mother asked. Playing Scrabble. That was partly true. After he got off the phone with Lottie, he'd started a new game with Yeo Man. But that was more than an hour ago, and she hadn't taken her turn yet. Do you want to talk about anything? Not particularly. Pause. Your father and I feel like we didn't get to have a real dialogue with you about this. We're sure you have questions. He had 1,000,000. He had none. She said something else, and he imagined the words getting stuck in the wood, even though he knew that wouldn't happen because there wasn't enough insulation between the sound waves of her voice and the subpar materials used to build his bedroom door. But, nonetheless, he chose not to hear and instead thought about what he'd said to Lottie. About student council. School had only been in session for a few weeks, and Ben already found middle school uninspiring. No Adam, no Kyle. He had several different teachers, and he didn't mind them too much, not even Mr. Brenneman, who taught advanced history in the most frustrating monotone imaginable. But thus far, he had no friends, and now that his parents were getting a divorce, it was clear that his entire world was crumbling, one brick at a time, and landing in rubble at his feet. He needed a change for the better, a project over which he wielded complete control. Perhaps student council was just the thing. All right, we're moving on to the last chapter of this section. It's called Pair. Rabbit hole. Enthusiasts believe that Scrabble is an ideal board game because it's the perfect blend of strategy and luck. You never know which letters you'll get, so there are elements you can't control. But if you know how to use what you're dealt, you can triumph. Charlotte's dad was the one who had taught her how to play Scrabble. When she was 7 years old, he pulled the board game out from the closet and set it on the dining room table. Charlotte was captivated because they never used the dining room table for anything except holiday dinners. It was strictly off limits, one of Mom's rules, because it was worth a fortune and couldn't get nicked. Later, the painting of pears watched over it. "Your mom and I played this on our first date," her father had said. He brushed away the dust. Charlotte's parents had met in the ballroom of the Rosecliff Mansion in Newport, Rhode Island. They were on a tour, and they were the only ones who went stag. Charlotte's father, Clayton, secretly worked his way through the small crowd until he was standing next to her mother, Ellen. They looked up at the same time to study the painted ceiling. After the tour, they had lunch and discovered they had a lot in common. They were both in their 40s. They'd both gone to Ivy League schools. They both liked to tour historic homes. They both loved puzzles. Charlotte's father unfolded the board and shook the bag of tiles under Charlotte's nose. Click, clack, click, clack. "You go first," he had said. She played pair, and they both laughed. After that, they played all the time, just the two of them. The box stayed on the dining room table so it'd be ready when they were. But last year, the game went back in the closet. Charlotte wasn't sure what happened, but suddenly, there were other things to do. There was too much to worry about. Middle school infected her life like a virus. She started hiding her dolls, even though she still wanted to brush their hair. She slipped stuffed animals under the bed. How babyish they seemed now. And she said no to Scrabble. That didn't stop her dad from asking. "How about a game?" he'd say. "Maybe later," she'd reply. Eventually, he stopped asking. Then the box wasn't on the table anymore. One day it was there, the next day it wasn't. When Miss Katari told her about her father's heart attack, Charlotte's feet had turned to stone. She couldn't move. For a second, she thought she might have a heart attack too. There was a weight on her chest that wouldn't go away. She had a million thoughts, but the only thing that came out of her mouth was, "I should have played more Scrabble." That's the end of our first section Monday. When we come back tomorrow, we'll read Tuesday together. I do have a couple questions. I started thinking as we were reading a lot about Charlotte's family and Ben's family, and I've heard the phrase compare and contrast a couple times already. So I was thinking down below in the comments, if you're participating, you could do a little compare and contrast of Ben and Charlotte's family. What is one thing that is similar or the same about their families? And then what's one thing that seems a little bit different? Maybe how the family's different or their living situation. Try to pick out 2 details and share below. Or if you can't think of 2, think of 1. Something that's the same or something that's different. Or just something you notice about their families in general. I'm really excited to read more comments. I've been checking every night, seeing more people subscribing and joining. I hope you're enjoying this book as much as me. And tomorrow we will start our next section Tuesday, and we'll read a couple chapters there again. All right, guys, I hope you have a great rest of your day. I hope you enjoy this read aloud today and have some fun with your families later tonight. I'll talk to you guys later and see you tomorrow. Bye.